Welcome back to another JVS movie review brought to you by the Middleburg Film Festival. This film here, technically JVS has reviewed before, but I happen to see it. Well, me and Sam happened to see it almost at the same time. I saw it at the Middleburg Film Festival. Sam saw it as a screener. And I decided, you know what? Our opinions on this film differ just enough for me to drop a review, as we've done this in the past, because when you have multiple people who review things, maybe everyone's opinion on the film isn't the same. This film here is The Harder They Fall. And here's the quick synopsis. Nat Love reassembles his former gang to seek vengeance against a man who murdered his parents, starring Jonathan Majors, Idris Elba, Zazie Beetz, Regina King, Lindo, LaKeith Stanfield, R.J. Seiler. I think I'm saying this guy's name right. I hope so. I'm sorry if I did, Mr. Power Ranger. And directed by Mr. Jeymes Samuel. Now, let's start off by saying, I happen to really like Westerns. So, when you tell me I'm getting a Western with this cast, I'm going to be intrigued. I was possibly hoping for maybe a more old school approach to a Western film. And instead, what you get here is a modern interpretation of what a Western film is, which unfortunately also means it's going to have lots of guns. It's going to have people who, for some odd reason, can never close to miss, except for in possibly a final act, miss a single shot in the film. And you get all of that here wrapped up in a Pulp Fiction type of world. That is the basic description I could give you of The Harder They Fall here. Now, the story of Jonathan's character, as we see at the beginning of this film, his parents are killed, and then he is branded by Idris Elba's character. And when that happens, we get the typical, it's time to get on a revenge mission type of plot. Not the best plot in the world, not something that you don't see coming a mile away. It's a very simplistic plot, which is not necessarily a bad thing here. It's not a great thing, but it's not necessarily a bad thing here. This, again, is a typical shoot-'em-up, modern-day type of Western. If you saw the remake of Magnificent Seven, if you saw the only action elements of Django, that's kind of what you're getting into here. Now, the overall story of him attempting to get his gang back together as he finds out that Idris' character, who's been locked away, is about to be set free, and it sets him on the mission to take this man out, as he's been doing throughout the course of time. We don't see it, but throughout the course of time, he's been picking apart the people responsible for not only killing his parents, but just bad people in general to him that we've seen them take out. And then when you get the big bad coming back, we get Jonathan Majors' character then deciding, I need to go after him and stop him at all costs. Now, what complicates things a little bit for me for this film is that it is so simple that you tend not to care about any of the characters in the film at all. Like, none of them have an interesting of enough backstory for you to care if anything happens to them. And because they don't take necessarily the time to really give you the backstory, instead they go directly into the Pulp Fiction element of the film, you kind of are lost. At times you could even be lost on which characters you should actually root for in this film, which is very weird. Because on one end, we understand what Jonathan Majors, Nat Love, is doing. We understand what his goal is. But then when we get to meet Idris's character, and we understand what his overall goal was for people, granted, he went about it in the worst way humanly possible, but his overall goal makes sense. And then you're lost, because you're like, okay, I don't really care enough about either of these characters to choose sides. So I'm just going to sit back and enjoy the action elements. And that's what you have here. This is an action movie. It is not a deep film. It is not something that's going to make you overly think. It's not something that's going to give you any great performances. But if you just like action, this film is for you. Again, that's why I compared it to only the action elements of Django and the remake of Magnificent Seven, which this film is very close to me, in the same mode of that type of film here. So while we meet interesting characters, with none of them really sticking out except for RJ, and that's because his character is funny. His character is extremely funny. But the cockiness and the funniness of the character isn't enough to really carry the point that some of the actors feel underused. When you have LaKeith Stanfield in the film, you give him more to do. When you have Jonathan Majors in the film, you know how he can ramp up the emotional elements of his performances. And while we get that in the third act, the first two acts, you don't believe any of it. Like, even he's supposed to be seeking vengeance. He's supposed to have a relationship with Zazie in this film. None of it is overly believable, but you're just there for the ride because it has an amazing soundtrack. The cinematography is really good. And it hits every action beat humanly possible. So if you are looking for a Western that is just action and no story, The Harder They Fall is perfect for you. If you're someone who wants more out of a Western, this is not the movie for you. This is not Tombstone. This is not Open Range. This is not The Proposition. This is not none of the what's thought of as more the modern day Western. This is not that. This is The Quick and the Dead. This is, again, the action elements of Django. I'm trying to think of the action elements of The Hateful Eight. Like, all of those things. It's like if you took a Quentin Tarantino Western and said, hey, all that extra dialogue that you put in there, I don't want any of it. All that extra story you put in there, I don't want any of it. All the need to highlight a character, whether it be supporting or lead, that really shines through. We don't need any of that. All we need is the action elements, because our soundtrack should carry us the rest of the way. That's what you get with Harder They Fall. That's what's not the best element for me, personally, for The Harder They Fall. So, Harder They Fall, brought to you by the Middleburg Film Festival. Out of a possible 10, I give The Harder They Fall a 6 out of 10. It's a great, great action film. But boy, do you want more. With a cast like this, you expect a better story, and you don't get it. You have elements of a story that could be really, really good, but then possibly the film would have to be maybe 20 minutes longer. Maybe some of the unnecessary things will have to be cut out of it to make you care more about the characters, but none of that happens here. And instead, you just get a straight action film. Great action at times, yes, but just a straight action film. And I just still have an issue with people who don't miss in Westerns. It's the most irritating thing in the world when I watch Western and feel like it's a perfect shot here. He'll never miss. And when he does miss, it's on purpose. Like, none of that makes any sense to me. But again, if you are just along for the ride and just to enjoy the action elements, the soundtrack, it is directed well. Again, the story is what fails you here. That's it. The story fails you. And you don't expect to see a cast with this many names of people who you know can give you performances. And you get nothing. And it just leaves you wanting more. Like, the entire film, it leaves you wanting more. I wanted to know more about Regina King's character. I wanted to know more about Idris' character. I wanted to know more about LaKeith's character. I wanted to know more about Jonathan's character. It's like they give you backstory, but then don't follow through with anything present to really reconnect you with the character. And then that leaves you just like, I guess I can cut my brain off and just watch this movie and enjoy the action. And if that's what you want to do, this is the perfect movie for you. So, The Harder They Fall, which drops on Netflix November the 3rd, I want to say. And this review will drop closer to the release of the film, just because we currently have a review up for The Harder They Fall. I cannot remember what Sam gave it, but I know Sam really, really liked this movie as we had discussions about it. Once we knew we weren't going to do our dual review, our group review for it, and we knew that we would do 2 separate reviews for it, then we had a conversation about the film, and boy, did our opinions differ on so much stuff on it, which made it interesting for me to drop a review, even though Sam has one up already. So check out both reviews. See if you agree more with Sam, if you agree more with me, or maybe you fall somewhere in the middle. Let us know what you think. This has been another JVS movie review. Peace, people.